because he knew that you were coming.
The Coleman family's trip to Ireland in 2021 began so well.
It was a magical time. It was snowing, the kids were having snowball fights, playing with their cousins. It was like picture postcard Christmas.
From such lofty heights, the fall was steep.
It was Boxing Day. We were sitting around the kitchen table eating leftover turkey, and I had this really minor cough and a bit of a sore back.
It was the Omicron variant of COVID. The remainder of Luke Coleman's holiday was not so magical.
Then I had to move into my mother-in-law's apartment where I was on my own for 10 days.
The Colemans cancelled their return flight and flew home when Luke was better.
Was in cancelling those old flights, we were due of a refund of around $7,000.
Luke Coleman says that was the beginning of a saga, including hours on hold to call centres, promises of refunds and statutory declarations.
I called them again. They can't find the stat dec. They asked me to send it through again, so I do. Refund, they say it's going to be processed. It never arrives. This goes on and on and on.
Never showed up.
It continued like this for nearly a year.
I kept calling through November, through December. December, again, I've been told it's been processed.
He started a log of his interactions with call centre workers, a different person each time, calls that would drop out after an hour on hold, requests to send information he'd already provided.
It was the single worst customer experience I have ever had with any organisation ever in my entire life.
The main complaint that we hear about is just the delay and the length of time it takes to get any problem resolved.
Consumer group Choice surveyed airline passengers about their experience with delayed and cancelled flights.
We found that of those who pursued a refund or compensation, 1 in 5 were waiting more than 6 months. Now that's completely unacceptable and not a level of service that we would accept in any other sector in the economy.
We've heard loudly and clearly that people are not getting the experience that they are paying for or expect to get.
The federal government has promised to tackle the poor treatment of passengers.
The government is establishing an independent ombudsman scheme and a charter of customer rights outlining the fair and appropriate treatment of customers and what airlines must do in the event flights are cancelled or delayed.
Aviation analyst Ron Barch isn't sure the ombudsman scheme goes far enough.
I don't think that they're going to change their behaviour unless there's legislation that dictates how they must act and provide the compensation that passengers ought to be entitled to.
The Ombudsman will be able to investigate consumer complaints and penalise airlines that don't comply.
There's no other aspect of our economy where consumer protection is not available. If you went and were buying a ticket, for example, a Taylor Swift concert, and the concert was cancelled through no fault of the promoter, you would expect a full refund, and you should be entitled to a full refund rather than getting a credit for the next time Taylor Swift is in Australia.
Among the new policies, a requirement for airlines to report the reasons for delays and cancellations, better assistance for disabled passengers, more money for regional airports, an expectation that big airlines train pilots rather than simply poach them from smaller companies. At busy airports like Sydney, the government says it'll tackle anti-competitive behaviour like slot hoarding. That's when airlines reserve scarce takeoff and landing times without intending to use them. It makes it very difficult for smaller airlines to enter the market.
If you haven't got flights into Sydney, you haven't got an airline. It's absolutely critical.
Some of the schemes seem a little difficult to enforce, like a plan to tackle unnecessary aircraft noise by asking pilots to fly considerately, whatever that means.
I would hate to think what inconsiderate flying by airline operations would be.
As well as being a former head of safety with Qantas, Ron Barch is a qualified pilot.
You, with air traffic control, are directed as to how you approach a runway.
Luke Coleman eventually got his refund, nearly 18 months after he returned from his COVID-affected family holiday. In a statement, Qantas said the delayed refund was unacceptably slow, and it had since made changes to make it easier for customers to get their money back. The stranglehold of Qantas and Virgin on the Australian market means Mr Coleman can't even express his frustration by going elsewhere.
You don't have a lot of choices. If you don't like one airline, you get stuck with another airline, and I must say I've had pretty bad experiences with both.